Something big has just been exposed. According to Omoyele Sowore, there's a secret plan, the dangerous plan, sitting quietly inside the Tinubu administration. This plan, Sowore says, is not about peace. It's not about national unity. It's not even about justice. It is about closing the case of Nnamdi Kanu permanently, through an outcome already agreed upon long before the court could pronounce a fair verdict. Sowore revealed that deep within the corridors of power, a confidential decision had already been made. According to him, this decision was reached after several closed-door meetings among powerful figures in the government and their close legal advisors. The alleged plan, he said, is to either sentence Nnamdi Kanu to death or condemn him to life imprisonment, depending on which option causes less political backlash. In Sowore's words, what Nigerians are witnessing now in court is not justice unfolding but rather a carefully scripted drama being dressed in the clothes of due process. Every hearing, every adjournment, every motion, he claims, is merely part of a performance designed to make the public believe that the judiciary is still independent, while in truth, the final outcome has already been determined. According to this revelation, Justice James Omotosho, who is presiding over the case, is expected to conclude Kanu's trial with a ruling that will shock many. Sowore claims the plan is to declare that Nnamdi Kanu's refusal to open his defense amounts to an admission of guilt, a legal interpretation that would give the government the perfect cover to deliver its prearranged verdict. That, he said, is the real intention. To make it appear as if the law itself has spoken, when in reality, the judgment was written behind closed doors. Sowore's statement came with a tone of warning. He said that Nigerians should not be deceived by the calmness of official silence or by the confidence of government spokespersons. What is happening, he insists, is part of a high-level conspiracy to silence one of the most controversial political figures of this generation, permanently. He compared the situation to a play where the actors already know how the story will end, but the audience keeps watching, hoping for justice. He said that Kanu's case is no longer about guilt or innocence. It has become a battle between power and principle, between a state determined to assert control and a movement that refuses to be silenced. The timing of this alleged plan also raised questions. Sowore pointed out that the ruling is expected in November, a month that holds a dark and painful memory in Nigeria's history. It was in November 1995 that Ken Saro-Wiwa and 8 other Ogoni activists were sentenced to death by a military tribunal under General Sani Abacha. The sentence was carried out swiftly and ruthlessly, despite global outrage. Sowore drew a straight line between that event and what he says is now unfolding in Abuja. He warned that Nigeria is once again standing at a dangerous crossroad, where political power is being used to decide who lives and who is silenced, while pretending that justice is being served. He explained that this moment is not accidental. It is part of a deeper pattern where the government wants to send a message that no matter how popular, vocal, or symbolic a person becomes, the state will always have the final word. But Sowore's tone was not only accusatory, it was also cautionary. He reminded Nigerians that silence during moments like this is what allows history to repeat itself. He said that when leaders begin to use the courts as weapons, and when justice becomes a tool of intimidation, every citizen should be afraid, because that kind of system does not stop at one man. The message was clear: what is at stake is not just the fate of Nnamdi Kanu, but the credibility of Nigeria's justice system itself. If this alleged secret plan succeeds, it would mean that political influence has completely taken over the courts. It would mean that trials are no longer decided by facts or evidence, but by decisions already made in private meetings long before the first hearing begins. Sowore's words hit hard because they come from someone who has faced the same system before. He knows what it means to be accused, detained, and silenced under the guise of national security. And now, he is warning that the same machinery of repression is being turned once again, this time toward Kanu. In his final note, Sowore said that this case is a mirror reflecting Nigeria's current state, a country struggling between democracy and dictatorship, truth and propaganda, justice and control. He said the people must choose which side of history they wish to stand on. Because if they remain quiet now, the judgment that will soon be read in court will not just be against Nnamdi Kanu. It will be against the conscience of the entire nation. To truly understand the fear and tension surrounding this case, one must look back at history, because Nigeria has walked this dark road before. What is happening now feels painfully familiar. It was November 1995. The country was under the iron grip of General Sani Abacha. The air was thick with fear, and voices that spoke truth were often silenced before they could be heard twice. That was the month when a group of 9 men, led by writer and activist Ken Saro-Wiwa, faced what the regime called justice, but what history remembers as one of the darkest judicial tragedies ever recorded in Nigeria. Ken Saro-Wiwa and his fellow Ogoni activists were accused of inciting unrest in the Niger Delta. But in truth, their only real offense was daring to challenge the powerful oil interests destroying their land. They demanded justice for their people, and for that, they were labeled enemies of the state. The tribunal that sentenced them was not a court of law in the real sense. It was a theater of fear, where decisions were made before the accused even walked in. Evidence was twisted, witnesses were coerced, and verdicts were prepared long before Judgment Day. And on November 10, 1995, the inevitable happened. Ken Saro-Wiwa and 8 others were executed by hanging. The world cried out in anger and disbelief, but Nigeria moved on, scarred but silent. That is the shadow hanging over this moment, 30 years later. Now, it is November 2025. The names have changed. The government wears civilian clothes. The language has softened. But the story, Sowore warns, is starting to sound too familiar. Once again, a controversial figure, a man who speaks for a group that feels unheard, stands before the state. Once again, the charge is wrapped in the language of national security. Once again, a judge sits on a case that could either strengthen Nigeria's democracy or shatter its moral foundation. Sowore's fear, and the fear of many Nigerians, is that the lessons of 1995 have been forgotten. That we have learned nothing from history. That power still prefers silence to dialogue, punishment to persuasion. He said it clearly: when a nation refuses to confront its past, it repeats it in a different form, under a different name, but with the same cruelty. This is why Sowore's revelation about a secret decision within the Tinubu administration feels so heavy. Because if it is true, it means that Nigeria has learned to modernize oppression, to give it new clothes and call it democracy. He said that the plan to sentence Nnamdi Kanu, either to death or to life imprisonment, would not just be a verdict against one man. It would be a message to millions, a reminder that the system remains untouchable, and that no amount of popular support or public sympathy can protect you once the state decides your fate. It is the same machinery, the same arrogance, only updated for a new generation. And like in 1995, there are those who will pretend that everything is fine, that the courts are independent, that justice is taking its course. But deep down, many Nigerians know when something feels wrong. Sowore called it a test of conscience. He said that if Nigerians stay silent now, they will wake up one day to realize that the same system that condemned Saro-Wiwa has simply changed its uniform, but not its heart. The tragedy of Ken Saro-Wiwa was not only that he died. It was that he was right, and Nigeria still did not listen. The oil kept flowing, the environment kept dying, and the people kept suffering. If this pattern continues, Sowore warns, the tragedy of Nnamdi Kanu may end the same way, not because the truth was against him, but because power was. He reminded the public that November seems to hold a strange curse in Nigeria's political history. It is the month when the powerful remind the powerless of how fragile justice can be. And so this November, the air feels heavy again. The anxiety is real, the silence is dangerous, and history feels like it's knocking on the door, asking if Nigeria will finally break the cycle or once again close its eyes. Sowore's statement isn't only about politics. It's about memory. It is a cry to remember the past before it repeats itself. He said that in 1995, the world watched and condemned Nigeria's injustice, but in 2025, the world might only watch, tired, distracted, and uninterested. That is why this warning matters now. Because this is not just another trial, it is a reflection of how far Nigeria has truly come, or how far it has fallen back. The echoes of 1995 are growing louder. Once again, the fate of a man has become the test of a nation. And this time, the outcome will reveal whether Nigeria has learned from its past, or whether history is about to replay its darkest chapter, only with new actors and familiar silence. Now the question before the nation is simple, but very heavy: what happens next? Nigeria stands at a moral crossroads, between truth and tyranny, between justice and convenience. The decision that will soon come from the court will not just determine Nnamdi Kanu's fate. It will decide whether Nigerians still believe that justice can be real in their own country. Omoyele Sowore has warned that the coming weeks will reveal the soul of this nation. If what he said about the secret decision inside the Tinubu government is true, then the outcome of this trial is not really a verdict, it's a confirmation of how far power can go to silence dissent. He said that the judgment is already being prepared to look clean, to sound lawful, and to feel final. But behind the language of the court and the technicalities of the law, there might be the same quiet intent to remove a man who has become too symbolic, too challenging, and too difficult for the system to handle. Sowore's warning goes beyond politics. It touches the heart of Nigeria's conscience. Because every nation reaches a point where it must choose between what is easy and what is right. And for Nigeria, that moment has come again. For years, the name Nnamdi Kanu has divided opinions. Some see him as a freedom fighter, others as a rebel. But even those who disagree with him now admit that the way he is treated will speak louder than any speech he ever gave. Justice, in its purest form, is not about who we like or who we fear. It is about whether the law still means anything when power is watching. Sowore reminded Nigerians that justice delayed is not just justice denied, it can become justice destroyed. He said that when courtrooms become stages and judgments become scripts, then democracy begins to rot from within. He fears that this is what is happening now. Many citizens have started to ask the same question: if this can happen to Nnamdi Kanu, what stops it from happening to anyone else tomorrow? This is where Sowore's voice grows firm. He says that Nigerians must not sit back and assume this is just politics. Because silence, in moments like this, is not neutrality, it is approval. He said that the government counts on that silence, the quiet acceptance of citizens who are tired, afraid, or distracted. But it is that same silence that allows injustice to multiply. He called on Nigerians to speak out, not necessarily to support Nnamdi Kanu's ideas, but to support fairness, due process, and the rule of law. He said that a government that begins to use the courts to settle political scores is a government that fears its own people. Sowore described this trial as a test for the judiciary, for the media, and for the public. Will the judge have the courage to act independently, or will he follow the political script? Will journalists speak truth to power, or will they echo the official line? And will the people remember that democracy is not just about voting, it's about standing up when power goes too far? He said that in times like this, nations show who they really are. Not through speeches or celebrations, but through how they treat the weakest voice standing before the strongest authority. Sowore's tone turned somber as he spoke about the danger of repeating the same moral failures of the past. He said that in 1995, Nigeria watched Ken Saro-Wiwa die, and history recorded it as a national shame. If Nigeria allows another injustice to unfold in 2025, history will not call it an accident. It will call it a choice. The story of Nnamdi Kanu's trial has already gone beyond one man or one movement. It has become a mirror reflecting the character of the Nigerian state. It is now about whether this country can still draw a line between politics and persecution. As the clock ticks toward the final judgment, tension continues to rise. The government remains silent. The court stays guarded. And the people wait, uncertain, anxious, and divided. But one thing is clear: this verdict will echo far beyond the courtroom. If Kanu is condemned, the administration may think it has ended a problem. But in truth, it may have started a much bigger one, a crisis of trust, a moral wound that will not heal easily. And if justice prevails, it will not only free one man, it will restore some faith in the idea that Nigeria can still protect truth when it matters most. Sowore's message at the end was clear and heavy: Nigeria cannot build peace on fear. It cannot build unity on silence. And it cannot build justice on lies. Now, the nation waits to see whether his warning will be ignored, or whether leaders will finally understand that justice is not a favor, it is a duty. History is watching again. And this time, the question is not whether Nnamdi Kanu will survive the judgment, but whether Nigeria's conscience will.